They told me to water the plants and keep the curtains half closed so the house didn't look empty. Like I was part of the furniture. Trusted to stay. Never trusted to come along. You know how these long flights are, Sarah. My son had said. Patting my shoulder the way you calm a nervous dog. You'd be miserable. Just watch the house, okay? We'll send you photos. His wife, Jenna, had smiled that tight, polite smile. Already scrolling on her phone. We'll bring you something from the markets. Mom. A shawl, maybe. It'll be fun for the kids if it's just us. They were all in the driveway, piling into their rented SUV like an ad for happy families. Greek beaches. Island tours. Quality time. My granddaughter Lily waved at me through the window. Earbuds in. Half there. Half gone. Bye, Grandma, she shouted. Love you. I love you too, I said. But the words were small against the slam of the car doors. They drove away laughing. Arguing about which beach to hit first. What seafood to try. No one turned to see my face when the car rounded the corner. Nobody wondered what it felt like to be left standing on the porch of a house you'd built your life inside. I didn't cry. I wiped my hands on my apron, went inside, and made tea. That's what women like me do when the hurt is too large and too old. We boil water and pretend control. The next morning, the mail slot clacked. I shuffled over, expecting flyers, bills, the usual stack of paper that proves you still exist in the system. Instead, a thick white envelope slid onto the mat. Travel agency, it said in bold blue letters. My heart stuttered once. I bent down, knees complaining, and picked it up. No stamps. No postmarks. Addressed to Mark, my son, but shoved into my mailbox. The seal wasn't even properly closed. I opened it. 4 plane tickets slid into my hand, glossy and crisp. Athens. 2 adults. 2 children. Nonstop. Seats together. Center of the cabin. Departure in 3 days. I scanned each ticket, line by line. No Sarah. No Mrs. Evans. No me. Just them. Perfect little unit. My fingers tightened hard enough to crumple the paper. For a full minute I stood in the hallway. 4 slips of proof in my hand, like the universe had dropped the punchline of a joke on my doormat. They hadn't even taken the tickets. They were so certain of their fun. Of their right to leave me behind. That the details didn't matter. Someone else would fix it. Someone else would hold the fort. Someone else would always be me. Something hot and sharp pushed up from my stomach. Not just hurt. Not just disappointment. Humiliation. I took the tickets to the kitchen table, laid them out in a neat fan. The kettle started to scream, but I didn't move. My hands were shaking so badly I had to steady them against the wood. I had been many things in this house. Henry's wife. Mark's mother. Jenna's emergency contact. Lunch packer, wound kisser, bill payer, night shift nurse. And lately? Just grandma. A title they said like a job description, free childcare, no questions, no needs. The kettle whistled itself empty. I picked up the phone. The number for the travel agency was printed on the corner of the itinerary. I dialed with fingers that remembered every school form. Every doctor's appointment, every crisis I'd handled for them. A chipper voice answered. Good morning, Sunworld Travel, this is Ava speaking. How can I help you today? I'd like to cancel a reservation, I said. My voice sounded calm. Someone else's voice. Of course, ma'am. Do you have the booking number? I read it off the page. She typed. I heard the distant clack of a keyboard, the soft pause of someone reading something that doesn't quite add up. Oh, she said. It's for 4 passengers. Are you one of the travelers? No. Silence crackled in my ear. Are you authorized to cancel on their behalf? She asked, softer now. I stared at the tickets, at my son's name, at Jenna's. Yes, I said. I'm the one who paid for them. Because of course I had. Birthday money, Christmas checks. We'll pay you back, Mom, as soon as things calm down. They never did. I never asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Can I ask the reason for cancellation? She said, more gently. I swallowed. The words rose like smoke. Because they thought I was too old to go, I said. And I'm tired of financing my own erasure. The line stayed quiet. I imagined her, young, headset on, eyes widening. She cleared her throat. I understand, ma'am, she whispered. The tickets are fully refundable. I'll process that now. She did. I wrote down the confirmation number with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. When I hung up, I stared at the silent phone. If Henry were still alive, he would have raged. He would have gone to Mark's house, banged on the door, demanded respect. But Henry wasn't here. He'd been gone 16 years. I'd learned to fold my anger into small shapes and tuck it away where it wouldn't scare anyone. This time, I didn't fold it. I opened the drawer where I kept my passport. Blue book. Still valid. I flipped it open. My face stared back at me, older, yes, lines around the mouth, the eyes. But the eyes were still mine. Still sharp when they needed to be. I walked to the computer, sat down, and pulled up the airline site. Athens. 1 adult. Departure, tomorrow. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I had $11,800 in my savings account. Another few thousand in bonds. No mortgage. No loans. No one's tuition left to pay. No one depending on me for food or safety or rides to school. They'd made sure of that. I'd been dismissed from duty. Old people are supposed to shrink. To accept less. To say thank you for scraps of inclusion. I clicked book now. When the confirmation email hit my inbox, my hands went still. I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. I called my neighbor, Claire. She'd lived next door for 22 years, sharp-eyed and kind. The sort of woman who notices when your curtains stay closed too long. Claire? It's Sarah. Hi, love. Everything all right? Would you mind watering my plants for a little while? I asked. I'm going away. A pause. Going where? She asked, voice brightening. Greece, I said. It felt unreal and completely right at the same time. There was a long inhale on the other end. It's about time, she said simply. Leave your key in the old flower pot. I'll take care of things here. And Sarah? Yes? Don't you dare call to check on them. I packed one suitcase. Not the biggest one. A small, stubborn case that fit exactly what I needed. Comfortable shoes. A light jacket. My best scarf, the deep burgundy one Henry used to say made me look like trouble. The navy dress I'd worn at his funeral, not because of grief, but because it made me feel formidable. I placed my passport in the outside pocket, then I sat on the edge of my bed, in the room where I'd slept most of my adult life, and listened to the quiet. The house seemed to be waiting for me to come to my senses. Instead, I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table. Claire has a spare key. The house will be fine. Sarah. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Just my name. The morning of my flight, the sky was a flat, indecisive gray. I locked the door, feeling the familiar weight of the keys in my hand. Then slipped them into the flower pot on Claire's porch. I walked down my own driveway with my suitcase rolling behind me. For the first time in decades, I didn't look back to make sure the house was okay. Let it worry about me for once. At the airport, everything screamed and flashed and buzzed. Screens shouted gate changes. Children cried. Wheels rattled over tiled floors. The girl at check-in looked barely older than Lily. "Traveling alone?" she asked, taking my passport. "Yes," I said. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "Good for you," she murmured. At security, they waved me through, then pulled me aside to check my bag. I stood with my arms out, shoes off, my dignity in a plastic tub. An officer apologized as he patted down my cardigan. "It's all right," I told him. "This is the least intrusive inspection I've had this week." He laughed without understanding. At the gate, I sat and watched people. Young couples with backpacks, arguing about currency conversions. Families herding children like anxious sheep. Men in suits welded to their phones. I wasn't like them. But I wasn't a ghost, either. When boarding started, I joined the line. The flight attendant scanned my pass and smiled, automatic and bright. "Have a wonderful trip, ma'am." "I will," I said, and for once, I believed my own words. On the plane, my seat was on the aisle. I sat down, buckled up, and folded my hands in my lap. The seat beside me remained empty until the last minute. When a man in his 40s slid in. Smelling faintly of coffee and stress. "Long flight," he said, fiddling with his belt. "Not long enough," I replied. He chuckled, surprised, then fell quiet. As the plane roared down the runway, my heart beat hard against my ribs. There was a moment, just one, where I thought, what am I doing? I am 72 years old. I should be in my armchair watching the news, not hurtling towards a continent I haven't seen in 30 years. Then the ground dropped away. Clouds swallowed us. The city shrank to a toyland beneath us. And I knew exactly what I was doing. I was leaving the waiting room of my own life. Athens hit me with heat the moment I stepped outside the airport. Thick, bright heat that wrapped around my shoulders like a shawl you hadn't asked for. Taxi drivers called out in a dozen accents, waving hands and signs. I picked one, climbed in, and gave him the address of a small pension I'd found online. Not a resort. Not a glossy hotel. A place with chipped paint and honest reviews. The room was small, with cool tiled floors and a narrow bed. The woman at the desk called me Madam Sarah and carried my suitcase up herself, refusing my offer to help. "First time in Greece?" she asked. "First time without a permission slip," I answered. She laughed. "Then you must eat. And walk. And see the sea. This is the rule." When she left, I sat on the bed. The silence here was different. Thicker. The air smelled of lemons and traffic and something ancient. I should have cried. Instead, I sat perfectly still and let the grief move through me without words. Not just grief for the trip they'd taken without me. But for every birthday I'd cooked through and never sat down at. For every "maybe next time, Mom." For every "you wouldn't enjoy it, it's too much walking," said as if my body were a burden instead of a miracle. When I could breathe again, I opened my suitcase. I took out my lipstick. Dark rose, slightly dried at the edge. My hand shook as I applied it. I hadn't worn lipstick in years. Somewhere along the way, I'd decided color was for people who expected to be seen. In the mirror, my mouth looked like a declaration. I went downstairs. "Somewhere quiet?" I asked the woman at the desk. "Not the postcards." "Something old. And stubborn." She smiled like she understood. "Anaphiotica," she said. And wrote the name on a scrap of paper. "You walk. Slowly. The city will be kind." She was right. White houses stacked on a hill. Cats sleeping in patches of shade, flowers spilling from clay pots. I climbed until my knees burned, then sat on a stone bench and let the city hum around me. No one told me to move faster. No one sighed impatiently behind me in line. No one looked at me and thought babysitter or burden. I imagined Mark's face when he reached the airport and discovered their tickets were gone. The rush. The confusion. The snapping anger that would come later. When he had time to decide whose fault it was. He'd call. He'd leave messages. He'd ask over and over. Why would you do something like that, Mom? And for once, the answer would be simple. Because I could. At a tiny shop, I bought a postcard. The front showed blue sea and white stone, a picture so stereotypical it might have been a cliché. I liked it anyway. In the shade of a crumbling wall, I wrote, "Lily, guess where I am? The sky is too bright and the sea is too blue and I am exactly where I decided to be. Love, Grandma." I did not write to Mark. Or Jenna. Let them sit in their unanswered questions for once. I met Margot on my third morning in Athens. Breakfast was served in a narrow room with mismatched chairs and sunlight pouring through old curtains. I sat alone, buttering my toast with surgical precision, trying not to shake crumbs everywhere. "You're being far too careful," a voice said, dry and amused. "Toast is not a fragile instrument." I looked up. She sat at the next table, silver hair twisted into a careless knot, eyes sharp behind oval glasses. French, if I had to guess. Her dress was navy, her lipstick scarlet, her posture unapologetic. "Better too careful than too messy," I replied. "Nonsense," she said. "Mess means you're alive." She introduced herself as Margot Dupont. Retired headmistress from Lyon. Widowed. On her second grand tour before the knees give up completely. "You?" she asked. "Sarah Evans," I said. "Recently escaped house sitter." Her eyebrows lifted. "Escaped?" I told her the short version. The tickets. The house. The cancelled trip. By the time I finished, her lips were pressed so tight they were almost white. "People become cruel when they are afraid of time," she said finally. "They see you aging and it reminds them they will, too. So they put you in a corner and call it kindness." "Is that your professional opinion?" I asked. "That's my old woman opinion," she said. "Which is far more accurate." We started walking together after that, not far. A few streets. A few cafes. She had the kind of presence that filled silence without noise. Where I noticed buildings, she noticed lives. Laundry lines. The way a man paused to help a child with her shoelace. A couple arguing softly in a doorway. We were sitting under a vine-draped awning one afternoon, sharing a carafe of cold white wine. When she said, "I have always wanted to see Florence." "Why haven't you?" I asked. She shrugged. Work. Routine. People who relied on me to be exactly where they put me. She speared a piece of olive with her fork. "And you? Somewhere you have always wanted to see?" I thought of the books Henry used to stack by his bed. Italy. Spain. Cities we said we'd visit one day when there was more money, when Mark was older, when life was less noisy. One day never came, I said. "Until now," she said. We booked the train tickets that evening. Two old women at the station kiosk, buying one-way seats like teenagers. I slept that night with the window open and the train confirmation printed and folded beneath my pillow like a talisman. In Florence, the air was softer, heavy with stone and history and tourists humming about the vibe. We stood in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus, Margot on my left, strangers on either side. Phones glowed. People whispered. I stared at the woman in the painting, newborn, vulnerable, completely unashamed of her own existence. My throat tightened. "You are making that face," Margot murmured. "What face?" I asked, blinking. "The one people make when something finally breaks loose and crawls out of their chest." She said. "Congratulations." We wandered across bridges and into narrow streets, ordered pasta that tasted like something holy. And laughed about nothing. That evening, back in our hotel room, I finally turned my phone on. 34 missed calls. 15 from Mark. 12 from Jenna. 7 from the house phone, desperate enough to call the woman they'd left alone. I listened to the first voicemail. "Mom, what the hell happened? We got to the airport and, did you touch our tickets? They said they were cancelled." Mom, this isn't funny. Call me back. The second. We have 2 kids crying in the terminal and no flight. Did you do this? Why would you do this? The third. Fine. I get it. You're angry. You made your point. You canceled a whole trip? Really, Mom? The rest blurred together. Fury. Confusion. Demands. Not once did anyone ask, "Are you okay?" I deleted them. Then I opened a new recording and spoke. Mark, I said. I canceled the tickets because I was done paying for a life I wasn't allowed to live in. I am safe. I am traveling. I am not your housekeeper, your free nanny, or your insurance policy. I am your mother. When you are ready to speak to me as such, without shouting, we can talk. Until then, I wish you a pleasant stay, wherever you end up. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I saved it in my phone under Voice I Owe Myself. Lisbon was a song written in blue and gold. We went there after Florence because Margot said, I want to hear Fado in a place that isn't pretending. That seemed like the sort of sentence one should obey. The guest house had blue tiles and crooked stairs. Our room looked out onto a square where children kicked a ball against a wall that had seen revolutions. One afternoon, Margot fell ill. Not catastrophically, just fever, aching joints, the kind of thing people my age are supposed to ignore until it kills us. Go, she said, waving a hand. See the city. I will be fine. I stayed. I made tea. Cold cloth for her forehead. I read aloud from a mystery novel in my best schoolteacher voice until she fell asleep. Caring for her felt different from caring for my family. It wasn't obligation. It was choice. A gift I wanted to give, not a duty I was punished for resenting. As evening fell, music drifted up from the street. The weight of regret in those minor chords almost made me laugh. When Margot woke, she looked at me as if seeing something new. You are dangerous now, she said. Dangerous how? You have realized you can leave, she replied. Women like us, once we learn that, the whole world should duck. The message from Lily came the next day. I had sent her a photo, on impulse, me on the balcony in Lisbon. Hair pinned back. Scarf around my neck. City sprawling behind me. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Oh. My. God. Grandma, you look alive. Where are you? Mom and Dad are losing it. They think you've lost your mind. I think you finally found it. Can we talk? I laughed out loud. Margot looked up from her paperback. Granddaughter, she asked. Yes, I said, typing back. I'm in Lisbon. I'm fine. I'm happy. Call me tomorrow? When Lily's call came, I sat on the bed. Heart pounding harder than it had on the plane. Her face filled the screen, dark eyeliner, too much mascara. The familiar small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her scooter at 5. Hi, she said, eyes shining. You did it. Did what? I asked. Left, she whispered. They never thought you would. We talked for 20 minutes. About school. About art. About the boy who liked her friend instead of her. About how she'd found my postcard and hidden it in her sketchbook so her mother wouldn't throw it away. At the end, she grew serious. Grandma? Yes, love? Are you coming back? The old Sarah would have lied. Would have said, of course. Soon. Don't worry. I don't know, I said instead. If I do, it won't be to the same place I left. Lily nodded slowly, like someone storing away an important truth. Good, she said. You deserve more. I don't know what exactly. Just more. Seville was heat and fire and defiance. Margot wanted flamenco. Not the tourist shows, she said. As we planned it in a cramped travel office. Real flamenco. The kind where people dance because they'll explode if they don't. We found it in a courtyard bar tucked behind a row of tired buildings. The dancer was older than us. Deep lines carved into her face, hair streaked with gray. Dress red as fresh blood. When the guitarist began, she moved like the floor answered to her. No apology. No coyness. Each stamp of her heel was a sentence. Each turn of her wrist, a memory. My chest ached watching her. She is my age, I whispered. She is your age, Margot agreed. She just never let anyone convince her she was finished. I couldn't take my eyes off the woman's feet. So sure. So relentless. What would it have been like, I wondered, to have lived my life that way? Unfolded. Loud. Without shrinking to fit the needs of others? The thought stung enough to bring tears. I didn't let them fall. Later that night, Seville air pressing against my skin like a warm hand. I listened to another voicemail from Mark. His voice was smaller now. Mom, I don't know what to say. The kids miss you. I guess I never realized how much we just assumed you'd be there. For everything. I keep thinking of you alone in that house. And now you're somewhere else. With someone else. Please. Just tell me you're okay. I held the phone away from my ear, the urge to relent rising like a tide. Women like me are trained to give in at the first sign of remorse. To rush in with, it's fine, before the apology fully forms. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the tiny balcony and stared at the slice of street below. People moved through it, all different ages, all at different chapters of their lives. I am okay, I whispered to no one. And for the first time in decades, it was true. The night I danced was not planned. Margot and I ended up in a bar near the docks in Cadiz, our last impulsive detour. Because she insisted the sea air was good for complicated hearts. The place was too young for us. Loud music, pulsing lights, people glittering with sweat and youth and bad decisions. We don't belong here, I said, hovering near the wall. Who told you that? She asked. Them, or the voice in your own head? I watched the bodies on the dance floor, shoulders loose, hips unashamed. A group of women in their 20s were shouting lyrics I couldn't quite catch, arms flung around each other like safety nets. I felt the same hot, restless thing I'd felt looking at the flamenco dancer. I wanted. Not attention. Not romance. Just motion. To feel my body doing something other than serving or waiting. I'm going, I said. Where? Margot asked, sipping her drink. Out there. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked onto the dance floor. No one noticed me at first. Why would they? I was another shadow. Another body. But then the music wrapped around my ribcage and pulled. My hips remembered that they had swayed once, in kitchens, in living rooms. When Henry would spin me around with a dish towel in his hand. My feet remembered that they knew something other than sensible steps. I moved. Clumsy at first. Self-conscious. Then less so. I let the beat find all the places in me that had been still for too long. A young man grinned at me as he passed, lifted his hands as if to say, yes, you too, why not? I laughed and spun once in place, skirt catching the light. Margot joined me, earrings flashing, glasses slightly crooked. We danced like idiots. Like legends. Like women who had finally decided to come back to their bodies. For 2 hours, I forgot I was someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's anything. I was just Sarah. Alive. Present. Sweating. Laughing. Legs screaming. I paid for it the next morning with aching knees and a back that threatened mutiny. It was worth every second. Barcelona was the soft landing. Our last stop, though we never said the word last out loud. We both felt the journey thinning at the edges, like a story reaching its final chapter. We stayed near El Born, on a street that smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. Our hotel had thin walls and heavy keys. Gaudy's work peeked around corners like a secret joke. One night, after Margot had fallen asleep, I sat on the tiny balcony with my notebook on my lap. I had started the list back in Lisbon. Things I have never said out loud. I wrote, I was never actually tired. I was just buried. Every time you told me I was too much or too old, I swallowed a part of myself to keep the peace. I did not mind caring for you. I minded disappearing to do it. I do not want to be remembered as always there. I want to be remembered as finally here. I lifted my pen. The city hummed below. My phone buzzed. A message. Not from Mark. From Jenna. It was longer than anything she'd ever written to me. Sarah, we've all been talking. Mark doesn't know how to reach you anymore. He's afraid anything he says will make it worse. We didn't mean to leave you out. I know that sounds hollow, but it's true. We told ourselves you'd be more comfortable at home. That the trip would be too much. The truth is, we were afraid. Not of you. Of what your age meant. Of what it said about ours. I'm sorry. We are sorry. If you ever choose to come back, we'd like to try again. No babysitting expectations. No, just watch the house. Just you. As, you. If you don't, I'll understand. But I hope you do. I read it 3 times. It didn't fix everything. It didn't reach back through the years and pull me into the photos I wasn't in. But it was the first time anyone had acknowledged what I had known for a long, long time. They'd put me away because it was easier. I didn't respond that night. I closed my notebook and wrote one last line. I forgive, not because they deserve it, but because I am tired of carrying their blindness as my burden. Coming home did not feel like surrender. It felt like walking back into a room I'd been locked out of, holding the key I'd forged myself. No one met me at arrivals. I didn't expect them to. I dragged my suitcase outside, hailed a taxi, and watched familiar streets blur by. The bakery where I'd bought Lily her first birthday cake. The park where Mark had broken his arm in 3rd grade. The school where Jenna and I had sat side by side in tiny chairs, listening to teachers talk about behavioral potential and social adjustment. Ghosts of younger versions of us hovered at every intersection. My house waited at the end of the street, exactly as I'd left it. Porch swept. Plants alive. Claire's touch everywhere. I stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old coffee. Everything was in its place. Couch. Frame. The photo of Henry on the mantel, frozen at 54, smiling like he'd never believed in death. I didn't unpack. I put the kettle on, sat at the kitchen table, and let the silence settle. My phone buzzed. Lily, are you home? Me, yes. Lily, can I come over? Yes, I whispered to the empty room, and typed it too. She arrived 20 minutes later, hair in a messy bun, eyeliner smudged. She dropped her bag on the floor and wrapped her arms around me so tightly my ribs creaked. You look different, she said, pulling back to study me. Older? I asked. Brighter, she said. We sat at the table, talking about everything and nothing. After a while, she fished a small notebook from her bag. You started a list, she said. So I started one too. On the first page, in neat, angry handwriting, she'd written, things I refuse to inherit. The idea that women expire. The belief that loving people means shrinking for them. The habit of saying I'm fine when my throat is full of screams. The silence that sits in your bones when you let people seat you at the edge of the table. My eyes burned. You're going to be all right, I said, voice thick. Because you were, she replied simply. The doorbell rang. We both froze. That's them, she whispered. Do you want me to? I'll get it, she said, already on her feet. I stayed at the table. I heard the murmurs in the hall. Mark's low voice. Jenna's soft one. The creak of the floorboard by the umbrella stand. Mark stepped into the kitchen like a man entering a courtroom. He looked older. Tired. Hair thinner at the temples. Shoulders less sure. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello, Mark," I answered. Jenna hovered behind him, hands twisted together. "We didn't know if you'd see us," she said. "You're here," I said. "So am I." "That's a start." We sat. I poured tea. No one joked that it was just like old times, because it wasn't. Mark cleared his throat. "I read your list," he blurted. My spine went rigid. "You what?" "In the photo from Lisbon," he said quickly. "Lily showed it to me. She said it was important that I see what you weren't saying." Typical, I thought, half annoyed, half grateful at my granddaughter's audacity. "It hurt," he said. "Seeing it. Knowing you felt erased. By us. By me." "Good," I said before I could stop myself. His head snapped up. "Good," he repeated. "Pain means you're finally feeling something I've been living with for years," I said. "I'm not interested in your comfort. I am interested in your understanding." He swallowed hard. "I understand enough to know I don't want to lose you," he said quietly. "Not like this. Not to my own stupidity." Jenna spoke next, words tumbling over each other. "We were selfish," she said. I dressed it up as concern. Too many stairs, too much walking, too long a flight. But it was fear. We didn't want to think about you, aging. We didn't want to slow down. So we made you small and called it love. I'm sorry." The apology landed between us like a fragile thing. I let the silence stretch, let them feel it. Then I nodded once. "I'm willing to see what you do with that sorry," I said. "I'm not willing to crawl back into the role I had before." "Okay," Mark said, voice shaking. "Okay." We talked. Not everything. I kept parts of my journey for myself. Kuddas, the dancing, the nights on small balconies feeling my life slide back into my own hands. They didn't get ownership of that. When they left, Mark lingered at the door. "Can I?" he started, then stopped. "Can we have you over for dinner sometime?" "Just us." "No, could you watch the kids while we go out?" "Just dinner." "With you." "I'll think about it," I said. His face crumpled with half relief, half guilt. "Thank you," he whispered. When the door closed, the house was quiet again. But not empty. Not oppressive. Just mine. Weeks passed. I watered my own plants. Walked around the block in the mornings. Bought myself flowers without waiting for a special occasion. A postcard arrived from Margot. A sketch of two women on a dance floor, one with a yellow scarf tied in her hair. "You were never fragile," it read. "They just built a small box and told you it was all you could have. Love, M." I pinned it on the fridge. On a Sunday, I called Mark. 5 o'clock, I said. "I'll bring dessert." He sounded like someone given a second chance he wasn't sure he deserved. At their house, I walked in like a guest, not staff. The dinner was awkward. Small talk sat between us like an extra placeholder. But there were moments, tiny, new, that felt honest. At the end, Lily cleared her throat. "I wrote something," she said. "Can I read it?" We nodded. "Things I want to remember," she read. "My grandmother taught me that disappearing quietly is not noble. She showed me that softness without boundaries is just a new word for surrender. She proved you can start over at 72 and that leaving isn't the same as abandoning. She taught me that loving people doesn't mean letting them seat you in the shadows." When she finished, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It felt like a room being rewired. Later, as I left, I handed Mark a thin envelope. He frowned. "What's this?" "A copy of your tickets," I said. "The ones I cancelled." I kept them. Not out of spite. Out of truth. So we don't ever pretend this started somewhere gentler than it did. He didn't open it. He just nodded slowly, eyes damp. At home, I took off my earrings, my shoes, my scarf. I looked in the mirror at the woman staring back. Older. Yes. Lined. Yes. But alive. Unfolded. I sat in my chair, opened my notebook to a fresh page, and wrote, things I no longer apologize for. Wanting more. Wanting space. Saying no. Leaving the room when I am spoken to like furniture. Coming back only on my terms. At the bottom, in smaller script, I added, I was never too old. I was simply never asked if I still dreamed. Now I don't wait to be asked. I go. In the weeks that followed, victory didn't arrive with trumpets. It came in small, quiet ways. My phone stopped ringing only when something was wrong. Mark began calling on Tuesday evenings just to talk. At first, it was stiff, weather, work, the price of groceries. But slowly, almost reluctantly, other things appeared. Do you remember that camping trip when I was 9? He asked once. The one where I got sick in the tent and you stayed up all night with me? I remember, I said. I never thanked you for that, he murmured. You were 9, I replied. You weren't supposed to. I know, he said, but I'm 48 now. So, thank you. After that call, I sat at the table with my tea and realized something strange. I wasn't waiting for their gratitude anymore. It felt like bonus, not currency. One Saturday, I pinned Margot's postcard back on the fridge and realized it had too much company. Postcards from Lisbon. Florence. Seville. A ticket stub from the flamenco bar. A napkin with a doodle from a cafe in Barcelona. They looked cramped together, pressed into the same small space. It bothered me more than it should have. So I took them down, one by one, and laid them out on the table. You are not souvenirs, I thought. You are proof. Proof that I'd lived something that belonged only to me. On impulse, I walked to the spare room. Once it had been Mark's bedroom. Then a playroom for Lily. Then a sort of chaotic storage cave for things no one knew where to put. I turned on the light. Dust motes spun in the air. The room was half forgotten. A faded rug. Old boxes. An unused desk. It looked like my life before the trip. Not anymore, I said out loud. I spent the afternoon cleaning. Pulling boxes into the hall. Sorting. Throwing away. Memories surfaced in scraps. The tiny shoes Mark had worn on his first day of school. A sweater Lily had left behind years ago. A box of cards from when Henry had been sick, all of them saying the same thing in different handwriting, thinking of you. I kept some. Let others go. By evening, the room was bare enough to echo. The next day, I walked into town and bought a big corkboard. The kind teachers use for classroom displays. I lugged it home like a treasure, laughing at myself when my arm started to ache. In the spare room, I hung it on the wall. One by one, I pinned my proof up, not as clutter, but as a map. Athens, Florence, Lisbon, Seville, Granada, Cadiz, Barcelona. When I stepped back, my throat tightened. It wasn't just places. It was pages of my own recovery. I wrote a small title on a piece of paper and pinned it at the top. Places I remembered myself. The next week, Lily came over, wandered into the room, and stopped dead. Oh, she whispered. Grandma, this is. She trailed off, fingertips hovering near the Lisbon card. It's my wall, I said. My life. In color. She smiled, eyes bright. I want one. You will have one, I replied. Just don't wait until you're 72 to start it. Word got around. Not about the tickets, that stayed between us. But about the fact that I'd gone. That I'd traveled alone. That I'd come back, different. Claire spread it in her quiet, efficient way, telling people at her book club, her church group, the grocery line. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. It was Irene from 2 streets over, a woman I'd nodded at for years but never really spoken to. She held a pie in one hand, her keys in the other like a shield. "I heard you traveled," she blurted. As if that were a crime we could discuss or conceal. "Alone?" "Yes," I said. She shifted her weight. "My daughter keeps hinting that I should just watch the grandkids while they go to Italy. Says it will be too much for me." I stared at her. "Do you want to go?" I asked. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded, so small it almost wasn't there. "In that case," I said, opening the door wider, "come in. I have a story to tell you." We sat at the table. She listened. At first, her hands were clenched on her lap. By the time I got to Lisbon, they'd relaxed. When I described dancing in Cadiz, she covered her mouth with shaky fingers. When I finished, she exhaled. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. "I thought I was ungrateful." There it was again, the word they hand us like a chain. Ungrateful. "No," I said. "You're unerased." She laughed, startled. We started meeting once a week after that. Sometimes it was just the two of us. Sometimes Claire joined. Then Nora from the corner house. Then a retired nurse named Alma who'd overheard us at the bakery. We drank tea, ate store-bought biscuits and laughed about our bones. But underneath, a quiet revolution was taking shape. "Travel doesn't have to be far," I said once. "It just has to be yours." We made a list in a spiral notebook: small places. Manageable. The museum 2 towns over. The lake an hour away. The old theater that still did matinees on Thursdays. We wrote our names beside each outing. "We need a name," Lily said one afternoon, sprawled on my couch while we planned. "A name?" "For your group," she said. "Like a club. Something badass." "We're hardly second drafts," she said immediately. "You're all on your second draft." I blinked. I liked it. The name stuck. One evening in late summer, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Sarah Evans?" a woman asked. Her voice was bright, rehearsed. "Yes. I'm calling from the community center. Your neighbor Claire mentioned you've been leading a group for older women, organizing outings, that sort of thing?" "Oh," I said, glancing at the cork board as if it could help. "I wouldn't say leading. We just go places." "Well," she said, "our fall program is coming up, and we're looking for someone to speak at an event we're calling Later Doesn't Mean Never. Just a little talk about starting again, I suppose. Would you be interested?" The old Sarah would have panicked. Protested. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly, I'm nothing special." The new one thought of Margot, arching an eyebrow, saying, "Why not you?" "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'd be interested." The night of the talk, I stood in a small hall that smelled of coffee and polished floor. There were maybe 30 chairs. 20 were filled. Most faces were older. A few younger ones had slipped in, daughters, granddaughters, staff. Lily sat in the front row, notebook in hand, eyes shining with a pride that made my stomach flip. Mark and Jenna were in the second row. They looked nervous, like people attending a confession they weren't sure they were allowed to witness. I stood at the lectern. My hands shook. I let them. I didn't hide it. "Good evening," I said. My voice echoed slightly. "My name is Sarah Evans. I am 72. And this year, I ran away from home." There was a small ripple of laughter. I let it settle. I didn't read from my notebook. I told the story the way I remembered it. The tickets. The cancellation. The first click of book now. Athens. Margot. Florence. Fado in Lisbon. Flamenco in Seville. Dancing in Cadiz with a yellow scarf tied in my hair. I didn't name my family. I didn't point fingers. I spoke about patterns instead, the quiet way women are filed under reliable and left in drawers labeled later. At some point, I said, you have to stop waiting for someone to slide your name onto the guest list. You have to write it yourself. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. The sound spread. Soft at first, then stronger. Not a standing ovation. Not a movie moment. Something better. The acknowledgement of women who had spent their lives in the wings. Finally seeing themselves on the stage. Afterward, a woman with a cane came up to me. Her eyes glittered. My son booked a cruise last year, she said. I was too frail to go. I believed him. I stayed home with the dog. Her mouth twisted. I wish I'd known you then. You know me now, I said. It isn't too late for your first disobedience. She laughed, a rusty sound that softened as it left her. Mark approached me, hands in his pockets. He looked both proud and a little bruised. You were good, he said. It sounded like a confession. I was honest, I corrected. That's different. He nodded, swallowing. I'm glad other people get to learn from what I did wrong, he said quietly. So am I replied. A month later, I was standing in my kitchen chopping carrots when Lily burst through the door, breathless. Berlin accepted me, she gasped. The program. I got in. She waved an email on her phone like a victory flag. I put the knife down, wiped my hands, and pulled her into a hug. I'm so proud of you, I said. Mom says it's too far, she muttered into my shoulder. Dad went quiet. You know how he gets. I leaned back, looked her in the eye. And what do you say? I asked. I say I'm going, she said. I'll figure out the rest. I smiled. Good, I said. You learned something, then, she grinned. Can you help me figure out what to pack? I mean, who else do I know who's run away to Europe? We spent the afternoon on the floor of her room, piles of clothes and sketchbooks around us. Halfway through, she hesitated. Grandma? Yes? Will you visit me there? In Berlin? It was the kind of invitation younger people assume older people won't accept. I thought of the corkboard. Of my passport in the drawer. Of Margot's postcard still on the fridge. Yes, I said. I will. Her smile could have lit a city. That's settled then, she said. The day Lily left, the house felt strange. Not empty. Expanded. We had a new ritual now, outgoing women instead of only incoming burdens. At the airport, I watched her disappear through security, backpack strapped to her shoulders, hair in a wild knot, waving her boarding pass like a sword. She gets that from you, Jenna said quietly beside me. What? I asked. That look on her face, she said. Like the world is big, but she's not small. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. A week later, a photo arrived, Lily in front of the Brandenburg Gate, scarf wrapped around her neck, grin splitting her face. Caption, first pin on my own board. Love you. I printed it out and added it to my corkboard. Not my journey. Hers. But part of the same inheritance. Not China. Not jewelry. Not a house weighed down with unsaid things. A legacy of leaving when you need to. One evening, late autumn, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my lap, notebook open. The air smelled of smoke and damp leaves. From inside came the soft clink of dishes. Mark and Jenna had insisted on cooking at my house for once. You shouldn't always be the one hosting, Jenna had said, and I had raised an eyebrow but let her. I could hear their low murmur in the kitchen. It no longer sounded like people managing me. It sounded like people sharing a space with someone they respected. I turned to a fresh page. Things that feel like victory, I wrote. Not begging for an invitation. Saying I'll think about it and meaning it. Watching my granddaughter board a plane without apology. Hearing my son say, what works for you, Mom, without flinching. Women gathering in my living room to plan lives that fit them, not others. I paused. In the quiet, I could almost hear the echo of my own feet on the streets of Athens, Florence, Lisbon. The clack of the dancers' heels in Seville. The laughter in Cadiz. The hush of the Alhambra. The sea breathing in Cadiz like a creature that had seen everything and still kept moving. I added one last line. Victory is not them needing me. Victory is me needing myself and answering. I closed the notebook, lay it gently on the table, and looked up at the night. The door opened. Mark appeared, apron askew, holding a spoon. Soup, he asked. It's almost ready. But, he hesitated. If you're writing, we can wait. I smiled. It'll keep, I said. So will the words. He nodded, shoulders relaxing, and held the door open for me. I rose slowly, knees complaining just enough to remind me of their existence, and stepped inside. Not as the woman who kept the house running, but as someone the house now had to make room for on her own terms. As I walked past the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection. Older, lined, hair streaked with silver, and behind all that, perfectly clear, a woman who had finally stopped living in the waiting room. I didn't smooth my expression. I didn't tuck away the small, private smile at the corner of my mouth. I let it stay. Because I was never too old. They had simply never asked if I still dreamed. Now, I didn't wait to be asked. I went. And I kept going.